technology is not neutral in any way anymore. If they can control the infrastructure where the data flows, they control the data centers where the data is placed, they have control of the software, you can basically control the societal development. It's quite dark if you want to use it in a negative way.
The world is changing, alliances are shifting, and technology is becoming a geopolitical tool. My guest today is Endre Dingsør, a technology strategist focused on digital sovereignty and the growing dependence on global tech infrastructure. And he believes this is becoming one of the biggest strategic risks facing news publishers and organizations today. If your entire workflow in the newsroom, your cloud, your analytics, AI sits in with one ecosystem, how exposed are you?
It comes back to trust, I think, if you trust the provider or not. And right now there are cracks in that trust all across Europe. And I think it's been a wake-up call for Europe in many ways, and needed one.
If you work in news today, what would you say is the biggest technology risk you think most publishers are underestimating?
I think technology, as it becomes more integrated into the news media, and at the same time increasingly more as used as a political tool, I think they will underestimate how technology will undermine the credibility of journalism and also readers' trust. So how technology is connected to the trust of the reader.
If somebody listens right now and runs a newsroom, the tech department, a product team, or sits on the media board of one of these big media companies, what might they understand differently by the end of this conversation you and me are having?
I hope they understand two things: that the world has changed and technology is not neutral in any way anymore. It's increasingly on the radar of the readers and people in general, and that there are alternatives and strategies to increase sovereignty that I think is very important for the media in general.
But before we go deeper, Endre, who are you and why have you chosen to focus on the question about digital sovereignty and this topic that we're going to be speaking about today?
I have a background in technology. I've always loved technology, been a technology enthusiast, and believed it's gonna both change the world and save our future, save us from future problems. And I've been, part of it through the cloud transformation, building platform strategies, a lot in enterprises. I worked in Europe and became more and more exposed to the fact that we live in a bubble up in Norway and in the Nordics, and we see it also on the saturation of the American tech in these countries. But if you go to Germany alone and even further south, you will see a lot more. Now that technology has become a political tool and also used in many ways with artificial intelligence that we didn't foresee. It's become a really powerful tool for influencing democracies and the way of life. And I think it's very, very important now to be aware of it. And in that case, I also started Choose European, which has two goals, basically. It is to show that Europe has quite a lot to offer. I'm enthusiastic every day when I get new software into the index, and it will become a procurement tool, but also the increasingly focus on sovereign data centers and sovereign AI, and also just the architectures that allow us to do both be secure, but also use the innovation power of the hyperscalers.
Let's just address the elephant in the room then, because I want to go to the question, what has really changed? And for me, also loving tech and being part on the tech side, like for a long time, technology for me felt almost neutral, almost invisible in many ways. But why does infrastructure suddenly feel strategic? And you say now with politics involved in it, what do you mean?
Yes, I have the exact same journey as you. I've been growing up in a generation or a few generations of peace with close relation to our allies. And it's been, I've been living in the US for a year, high school, like many. And I've also been used to being adaptive to the technologies and the great services that have been developing the past years. Right now, something has changed, and it's definitely political. It's the strategies and the current administration in the US and how they view Europe, our democracies, and how we live. And basically, it says that they support the sovereign countries, which means it's easier to negotiate with one country. They have an AI action plan who says and states that it's important to that allies are a full consumer of all the tech stack. And they have a defense strategy that says something about we should support US, but they will limitedly support us only if it's increasingly important for them. So all in all, it's a more transactional lens that they're viewing Europe at the moment. And that means that if they can control the infrastructure where the data flows, they control the data centers where the data is placed, no matter where they are on location. They have control of the software. They can use artificial intelligence on it. You can basically control the societal development. So it's quite dark if you want to use it in a negative way. And let's hope it's not going that far, but that's maybe the reason why it's not neutral anymore, and it's not an IT decision. It's definitely strategic for every board and every organization, and also in every democracy.
Because I think for both of you and me being on the tech side, if I were to go back even just short time, 5 years, it was very often, oh, you come in with the software, speak with our IT department, and sort of you had others stepping, they're going to be doing it. But for me, as you say, it's becoming more like a strategic thing where you need everybody around. But what you say makes me curious on the point that has this already been happening, or is the AI right is really accelerating this thing that's happening at the moment?
Yeah, I think AI has definitely been a catalyst, an enhancer for everything that's, both good and bad and ugly in the world. It is extremely strong tool and technology and a way of using large sets of data in ways we didn't imagine earlier, and in a pace that is, much faster than any democracy or any people really as a group can act on or even understand. So that means that it's now it's becoming a tool for the few, and it's becoming a tool for the ones who act, and it's also increasingly hard to really understand how much it influences every part of society, I think. So AI definitely enhancer and booster of the transformation we've already seen in many, many years. Yeah.
And you talked about allies in the beginning, and it makes me think, for this conversation, is it about Europe versus US, or about diversification and resilience in this case?
From a European perspective, I would see it as a conversation about rebalancing, diversification, resilience. It's the European conversation now is that we're asked to build greater sovereignty, which is important, and I think it's been a wake-up call for Europe in many ways, a needed one, and we're doing so. So it is also increasing. You can see now that the way that Europe has chosen for sovereignty is not the way that the US expected. And yesterday, there was a dossier to the diplomats in Europe as well to push against the sovereignty initiatives in Europe, because the sovereignty part was much more about buying defense equipment and also buying the technology from the US perspective. While from the European, it was taking more ownership to their own, both data and ability to act on their own. So I think from European side, it's rebalancing and maybe diversification and own resilience. While from the US, it was a turn to they didn't expect. Yeah.
Let's bring the conversation into the world of news publishers. One of the things that, for example, I see differently here in the Nordics is that there is a big focus on getting direct traffic, engaged readers directly to the homepages. The Nordics really being really been great at doing this. But if you look at the rest of the world, we see then a pattern of being very dependent on, for example, Google traffic, Google Discover, social media traffic, and publishers really have already experienced dependency through search and social distribution, mainly by American tech providers in general. Do you think that we're now repeating the same pattern with AI and cloud and what's out there, and any recommendation for publishers?
I think definitely we are. We didn't see what was coming in social media either, and we didn't see the exponential growth that these companies went through and how they used data. So it's eating into the media business, definitely, and we've seen it, and we're kind of feeding it a little bit ourselves naturally. So I think take social media as one part. It's a lot of initiatives now to also take back some of that part. We have some in Norway, we have several in Europe, and I know that for both media and others, it's becoming a choice of values, but also a strategic choice to be where the customers, the readers, the citizens are, and that will also increase the growth of the social media. Going back to your question regarding AI and cloud, I think definitely we are. It's easy to choose it because it's been our going preferred choice forever, and for everyone who works in digital, it's always been like that, and the last 20 years, a lot. And, everything when it comes to technology is ease of use. And that means we have invested all our money in licensing, building the largest companies in the world. I think we have to take in on ourselves the technology is much more mature at the moment. It means we can build hybrid clouds. We can use and allow for European cloud providers as well, who are mature, who already have millions of customers, large enterprises, extreme security, defense, everything built on and serving already. So it's not like any use case can't be served. It's more the differentiator here is probably the pace of innovation that we see in US tech that you can still take part in.
And I think very much when it comes to, for example, the distribution of traffic, that sort of a lot of the news publishers being dependent on the traffic they get from Google and so on. It's been always good because it always links back to the homepage where you have sort of like a economy at scale there. But now when you're having the AI summarizes directly in Google, you don't have that traffic anymore. It creates questions about the economies of publishing. But then this brings me into the next question, sort of the influence on editorial independence. I guess like the infrastructure choice here would really also influence the editorial independence in this case.
Absolutely. I think we have some major problems in front of us that we need to act on in a way. One is that the large language models are a tool for information. You provide information very easily, and there are discussions now on how many will actually use the large language models to get advice on how to vote in the upcoming Danish election. And then the question comes up, so what's the bias? What tells you how it should present the recommendation based on your input? So it's not something you can decide as a person just using it. It's up to the model or the owner of the model. So that means that everything that's presented to you is can be controlled, and it's no secret that large language models and AI in that matter is the perfect tool for changing public opinion in one direction or another. So I think the core here is that we need to see both that reading the data, having access to it, means that you can apply AI on it and get some insights, and data is valuable in that matter, information. And then you have the actual tool to present it as well. That means you have both parts of it. So if you're in the media now, I think and a lot of people have a lot more knowledge about this than me, but what you see if you go to the major trends is that the explosion of hate speech, the explosion of garbage in these channels that we have learned to love, makes it a stressful experience. And that's why you get this counter drive, I think, from especially Europe, but also some American companies who try to get back to the original thought of real actual thoughts and communication between people, right? And I think that can also be transferred to the media, that people still need this. The social media is not meant for an educational or even natural way of talking about issues, but the media is. And the local issues are just as important. So I think there is an opportunity here also to take ownership to the new channels and become that trusted media outlet and provider of neutral, well-informed, even local and the national perspective on what's happening in the world, which is still needed. Yeah.
I think your point is valid because, I mean, when you're having a lot of what you say around not controlled algorithms feeding you just what you want more. I mean, the need for editorial news is needed more than ever. You have something that is editorial driven, something that listeners will know. I say very often on the podcast is a trend that's very popular in the newsrooms today is implementing something that's called user needs. And is to understand what the need our article is filling. Is it update me, inspire me? And you have all of this great perspective in editorial, but I say for social media, the biggest user need you're fulfilling is waste my time. Yeah. And that is basically why you just sit there. But then when you say that, it rings a couple of alarm bells on me, having worked on the tech side, talking with these companies as well as you, is that if your entire workflow in the newsroom or as a news publisher, your cloud, your analytics, collaboration, AI sits in with one ecosystem, how exposed are you?
Again, it comes back to trust, I think, if you trust the provider or not. And right now, there are cracks in that trust all across Europe. So 2.5 million French governmental employees changed from Teams. And they say directly it is so you can't eavesdrop on our public decisions and our public discussions. The ones that we have in our society. So that means that the trust is not there for them. And if you put in a few things that says the main battle now is to win the AI race. That's the only thing you care about. And the only way to win it is access to data. That's the limiting factor when it comes to training models and becoming the best model. Then your question really is, if you have the means, you have the access, you have the infrastructure, you have the software, you have the access to the databases, will you use it to win the most important race in the world, defining the next decades for your country, or not? And then you have to transfer that to your own solutions and if you trust it. And I mean, this has also as simple as your sources. If you have input by someone, you don't want to share the name, but you store it on American tech, can you really say that it's secure now? That we know that NGOs and also someone has been identified and have sanctions against them as persons. So it's really about trust. If you trust the wording and what they say and market now, or if you believe that the political force and the forces against these companies are stronger.
On the topic of trusting sort of the vendor, one of the things that at least is important is the cost curve and the pricing on this. And let's come back to sort of like what's accelerated this conversation, and it's definitely AI. And for me, at least, using it and seeing it being used in our companies and news publishers, I mean, for me, AI feels cheap right now to use. And cloud that you've been working with felt cheap also in the beginning, but what happens when the pricing power kicks in, and that we've seen at least with cloud?
I think you will have exactly the same mechanism. One is to build the habit of having it, building it into every process of how you work and how you live your life and what you do, and then you increase the price or bundle it. That's been, that's the major commercial force of anything. What we see now is that you have so much investments in physical data power for driving both the AI data centers, the chips, the memory, and everything. So prices are increasing on every part of that we need to build the infrastructure, as well as all the investments building before the building all these data centers. And that is not that someone has to pay that investment, and that's the client, right? So the wave is coming. They call it the AI cost wave. It's definitely coming. And I think that's also shows why it's important and a strategic topic and very important to discuss it. So what is the driving cost? Where do you always need closed, expensive models? What can you do to optimize? All these cases that were already solved in media, which is, text to speech, etc. Can we reduce the cost of every action or the compute used to do it? Can we use local models? Can we use smaller models? Can we use trained models? Can we do it in our own infrastructure or European infrastructure where we have compute control? What are our options? And I think this should be on every CFO's table. And by that, I mean also on the board, because this is a future cost increase that will further reduce your margins. And if you have no way out or no plan to mitigate it, you're going to be in trouble.
Like if you're a major publisher ending up in this sort of bundle, let's say with one of the vendors you mentioned here, like how easy is it to migrate away from a current tech stack 5 years? How realistic would that be if you're within this bundling? I guess this is where you create the lock-in effect.
Absolutely. I think when it comes to if it comes to migrating away, every option is there. So, but I think what you need is both a pragmatic approach. You need some leadership support and engagement. It can't be just, given as an order to IT. And you need this positive tech management. And you have to remember, everyone's growing up with education, with trips, with gadgets, with free courses, with training, etc. They have their preferences. They're comfortable in some technologies by some companies. So it's really, really hard to change that. What we're actually asking people is you have to provide the same level of service, as well as taking part in all the new inventions that are coming. But you have to do it on technology you don't know, and you have to do it probably with limited budgets. So it's really a complex ask, and that means that you have to do it as a group. But when it comes to technology, it's doable, it's done already, and there is a lot of people who can help you along. And I don't think it's binary. You don't have to go. Digital sovereignty isn't disconnecting from the internet or just, operating on your own. But it's about having more choice. Let's say be more attractive to the ones trying to sell to you, because when they have nothing more to sell because you bought it all, they will just increase the price and the bundles. But if you have diversified again, you are just in a different position. So that means hybrid. Take out some of it. Be conscious about what you want to own and what you don't. So this is not a discussion about turning off the lines or the cables, or can happen, but I don't think it will happen. But it's about pressure. It's about not giving you the services in your data center. It's about not providing you with necessarily the same service as everyone else. So it's a different. It's many ways that you can be pressured on.
But when, as the first thing I asked you in the beginning of the podcast here, I said to you like choice of tech felt almost neutral in many ways. Do you think that boards, the C-level today are just treating sort of tech software. It felt for me like before, they just felt this is like procurement, let's push it over to the tech team. But when it may actually be a strategic risk in management, I mean, does not the leadership have to be clearly involved in the new world that we're going into?
Absolutely, 100%. It is already a strategic risk, and it's not becoming, it's not even a discussion. It is a strategic risk, and you can see it. That's not me saying it. It's France, it's Germany as a country. It's large companies moving to Europe. So it's not me. It's people who's been a lot more into the details and know a lot more about the risks as well. So that means that, yes, every board should be a part of it, have it on their agenda, and actually get trained on just the geopolitical part of technology, which is now a part of it. It's not procurement, but procurement could definitely be one of the tools you can use if you add sovereignty as a part of the procurement criteria. You will, have a long-term guidance in a direction that you want. So the board should ask these questions and require feedback and also follow up on topics like sovereignty.
Let's talk about sort of Europe specifically, because I would say majority of at least a lot of tech used is coming from the US. Does Europe actually have viable alternative like across clouds, AI, software as a service for example, publishers in this case?
I would say definitely yes. They have it on a general scale, but it's not a one-to-one comparison. And I just want to, go back and remind everyone that Europe in the past 25 plus years have focused only on building US tech. We have financed the biggest companies in the world for a couple of decades, and we still do it. But then we expect the ones we didn't pay attention to be a one-to-one. So I think maybe the biggest hurdle here is that we have to change. We have to do something a little bit differently. But remember, most of media today, they have European solutions on a lot, and in a SaaS ecosystem where we already are, where you have specialized tools as a part of, editorial workflow or how you do your work in social media or promoting and marketing the technologies, etc. It's more about orchestration. And Europe has a lot of all of these SaaS tools. And they are also, a part of they're built on our rule set and our legal system. So you don't have to be worried about if the lawyers will come after you if you get any fines that you do now with US tech. So there are actually quite a lot of frustrations and worries that you have today that will be gone if you move to more European tech. And when technologists look into it, you will see that for most of what we need, everything is there, simply and easily ready to use. And then you have the argument that always comes back, which is the closed models are the best. And they are at the moment. But sovereignty is not saying you can't use them for innovation or being part of that journey. But it says you don't have to use it for everything.
I couldn't agree more, and just for everybody and the listeners and now in the conversation. So being a European company going out in the market selling the solution that we're having, I just want to say that there is a lot of great solutions out there specifically for news publishers built in Europe, built by European companies. But the conversation is not necessarily American tech versus European, but then I'm just curious to one of these things, however, and your perspective is that for me, going back also in if it's news publisher or in general, is being sort of like, why haven't European solutions when it is there being sort of default choice for a lot of European companies? And what's sort of the driver and has that been the reason to?
I think it's basically if you talk about Norwegians, let's say Norwegians, since we're that's something at least I know, and maybe Germany as well. There are engineers, so they're awesome at building things, and they probably provide a lot of the innovation in the world today. At the same time, no one knows about it, so there are no salespeople, right? No marketing people. What the US mindset has always been is sell, 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 and then build, right? Well, we build until it's done, and then we start looking if there's someone who might be interested in this. So we have a completely different mindset, and that makes the US tech a default choice for European for many reasons. It's the marketing, they're awesome at it. It's the selling, the budget for sales. And we've lived in deep peace for 80 years, admiring the leader of the free world. It's been, on our side, someone we look up to, a culture we wanted to be a part of. And combined with that mindset in sales, we're becoming the trusting customers and lean back, really. So now we pay the debt for that.
I can definitely speak for having been part of American companies. I agree with your thought on it. I think very often what I see for at least tech being created out of the Nordics or might be also in Europe, it's very often that you think, okay, if the product is great enough, it will sell itself, while the mindset of American companies sell, 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 think about the use cases, go out there. And I think that's something to really improve on. But if I were to sort of ask you the hard question here, like let's just be addressing the uncomfortable reality in my mind, is that if we're talking about AI, like many of the US AI models is currently leading. Is it strategically irresponsible for like publishers or other companies to move away from the edge that they're having and everything? Is it they at least they claim to be the best, and it seems like it. So wouldn't they miss sort of the race of having the best solution?
That's why I think hybrid is the way to go. Like everything in the world, it's not black and white, it's not binary. So yes, they are the best. But I think if you ask any organization, news media or enterprise or whatever, it's not that every process, every product, every person, every asset of that organization is on the bleeding edge. A lot of it is basic stuff, right? So that means what you need to be aware of what you need the bleeding edge cases for. So for some use cases or innovation teams or being part of that development, super important. But for everything that's been solved, you will go into operational modus. You will go into cost reduction and rather focus on getting it into operations in a solid way. And then you don't need the big models because it's already solved. It was the last month model capacity that's fixed now, right? So let's just have a comparison with, they say, open source models. They are at 90% capacity of the closed ones. They are at 13% of the cost. And that means that you can solve most use cases with that. And if you have a year, by month, etc. development here, it means that most of the use cases you don't need the bleeding edge new models for it. You need it for parts of it. So then you build in typically a router. So say for this request or this type of data, you will use this model. But for this request or these types of agentic or people work, you can use other type of models that are cheaper, that are more focused, that maybe are even trained on your language, right? So when you have, let's say, going back to media, you have a process of getting content out. If you use a model trained on US English text in general, you always get this, it's a little bit flat. Can't really say what it is. And then you have this awesome project in Norway with the national libraries building a language model with Norwegian historical text and also in collaboration with the news and media. And that means that you get even better language, right? So that's a good example of you would use what's best for that case, which is maybe in a publishing workflow, you will also improve the text with these types of models. So that means if you have a solved use case that can be solved by another open source, even a smaller model, use that instead. It's cheaper.
I think also language becomes very much the same if you sort of use the same. We all know on LinkedIn for everybody writing, it is not X, it is Y. And then it's the clearest, lots of them, especially also on like very motivational language, which is far-fetched from like the Norwegian language. And just, you mentioned here like the Norwegian library, just for the listeners, can you just tell what that is? Because I know of it, and I just find it a very interesting project that is, I would say, a way to get more closer to the Norwegian tone.
Yeah, it is. It is training of a model using Norwegian written sources, basically, or Norwegian language sources. So that means that you scramble everything you have, which wasn't probably always available on the internet either. So you have even larger sources, and when you get the media, historic archives as well, you get a much better data source and much more data that represent the Norwegian language, right? How the small nuances that we know distinguish the flat tone or something there to the that feels right type of language. So that's why I think it's extremely important, and we will see so much more of it, that we get these smaller models optimized for our culture, our countries, our way of talking to each other as well. So I think we will see an explosion of this in Europe, and in Norway is leading this. It's very inspiring.
I would say good luck for OpenAI's model to understand the sayings such as we have in Norway of being hanging with a beard in the post mail. It's not any other than Norwegians that will sort of understand that. But then your point is that a hybrid strategy is sort of realistic here. But that would be also then you might be using some like global leaders when necessary, but you have the option of diversifying like critical infrastructure across other things that we talked about, for example, news publisher here with language being so important that's linked to not necessarily the big global players, but for something that is better for the local language.
Absolutely. And I mean, that's an example of a model in the work flow, right? That you can use models to constantly improve before the end result, and you get it out there and then further improve it. But so that's an example of an hybrid. It can be hosted in the global hyperscalers anyway, right? So you can still put it there if you want to. So one part is if you get a limitation of capacity, or if you don't want if you have some trust issues when it comes to access of the data, and maybe even some sources or some readers are trying to tell you something that they don't feel comfortable with it, right? The technology you're using, the hybrid will also solve that. So the hybrid in many ways gives you the best of both. And it's also a very valid strategy for a transformation. And the technology is mature, and it can be, you can go how sovereign you want in a way. It's really up to you. But there are many use cases where I think you will see both a cost decrease and also maybe be surprised by all the good software available in Europe.
So for the listeners again, and majority of the listeners are working in the news publishing, editors, people in C-level, the tech listening right now. If you were to be advising them and let's say a global news publisher today, what would be the first concrete step you would recommend them in terms of the conversation we've been having?
I think speed and being pragmatic is quite important these days, actually. And I think one of the things that will lead to action is to go back to the reasons why you're doing what you're doing. So I would actually connect IT and the political part of IT with the mission to provide, independent, reliable, timely information to the public, being the watchdog in society to help create a healthy democracy. And if you go, this is what we're doing, then you need to say, so how do we do that? And look around us when it comes to people's trust and the immense trend in or immense move towards higher sovereignty in Europe. We need to be a part of it. I think that's just, if you look around, that's going to be the answer. So start, like every change process, start with the simple things. See if there is a CRM you can change, or if there is a social media sharing SaaS that you can change. Look at the SaaS ecosystem. Change where possible. That's often quick wins, right? If you look to France again, and this La Suite, which is basically rebranded bundle again of open source alternatives to the entire work collaboration tool set we have. So that means for the entire public sector in France, it's good enough. For countries even, it's good enough. For now also in Germany with OpenDesk, an increasingly larger part of public sector will be moved to it. So it's becoming a default. It means the quality will also go up, and everything we lack will be becoming as a part of it. So then it just look outside of the original choices and start picking, start learning. I would say create an open source program office. It's a fantastic way to get started, because then you will look at what's out there for open source. And open source is the most important part when it comes to sovereignty. So you take a data center, you use cloud agnostic tools. Most of these are open source. And just a fun fact, out of the 500 most powerful computers we know of, 100% runs Linux. In Azure itself, it's 60% or something. It's over 50 at least on Linux. It's in cars, it's in NASA, it's in everything that needs to be stable is Linux, open source.
I know,
So it's already there.
I know that one of our developers in Kilkaya is going to be loving that he's very pro Linux, so he will love that.
It is a lot out there, and it's so many good and fantastic software and tools and SaaS that you will get if you just have a look. So in Choose European, we're building an index now, which will hopefully become a procurement tool as it grows. But it will also be we're building now with others a way of giving you the education and also the means to bridge the gap from I would love to do it to how do I do it. And that means using sovereign AI, sovereign cloud, etc. So to summarize, basically go with the easy things first, but also outline a long-term strategy to say we are going in this direction, and then involve people.
Makes completely sense. And if you were to, like, throughout the conversation now, and then a lot of the things that both you and me see happening in both, not regardless of then the news industry, but in Europe overall, like if we look 5 years from now, will we be looking at this moment as the beginning of sort of rebalancing of global tech? You see, maybe specifically in Europe, but then do you see this across other parts as well?
I think so. I think we've seen, to put it in Carnet's word, it's a disruption in a way. I don't think the Americans see and understand what they did with the trust of their allies, and they don't understand why they act or react as they do. But I think the strong reaction and the strong wording and the strong movement now towards sovereignty is something you can't stop. So it's definitely now is the time, and if you're late on the game here, you will also be late when it comes to having the right competency in the future.
Endre, this conversation has been really, really great, and I appreciate you joining, sharing your thoughts on the topic. And I think there are some really good nuggets here to then think of when we think about the choices we make of tech. We have a closing tradition on the podcast where the previous guest gets to leave another quest for the new one, not knowing who they are. And I'm actually very happy about this question coming to you. The last guest I had on was Jeremy Clifford, who's an advisor. He's been previous editorial leader of some of the biggest UK publishers and now works as a consultant in leadership in Newsroom. And he asked, even though you're not necessarily in the news industry, but I think the question is still relevant, is that how does a leader need to change the way that they lead their teams in such a way that they bring the whole of the team with them and embrace the next wave of technology coming to the newsroom? And it's very, very much also a lot of the tech change happening that we discussed, but then how does a leader need to change the way they lead their teams with all of these new things happening?
I'm pretty clear on this. I also love that question. It's very good and relevant in this case. I think technology now, to go back to the starting question, actually, technology isn't neutral anymore. It's affecting our democracy, our safety, everything we see around us, and everyone we love, right? So that means technology has become so much more. And I think in news media, where everyone working there know why they're there. They know that they have a place in society and in a democracy that's very, very important. And they know that they want to keep it that way, right? So that means that the value aspect is suddenly a moving factor when it comes to a leadership. It's always, been there, but in this case, I think it involves so much more. So the mission can be so much more important. It's not about the bleeding edge technology or reaching a deadline. It's actually building a safe haven for publishing information to the public and the democracies that you live in. And that requires taking the right choices on technology.
I think actually, like what you're saying there is that for like a leader bringing their team with them, there's no option. This is gonna be happening if you want it or not, and the changes in this is just gonna be tremendous. So you have to act on it, and you have to be embracing it.
Yes.
Endre, you get to ask a question for the next guest, not knowing who that person is. It can be any sort of question, ideally also related to sort of like the topics that we discuss here. But do you have a burning question inside you for the next guest?
I have one that I don't have an answer for myself when it comes to the media, who's not my, primary, where I have most of my knowledge from. But it's we're moving into a couple of years now where we have another risk profile around us. We have Russia, we have war in Europe, and we have and when there is a crisis, information is needed, but the capacity is low. So how will the media now change for their new role as not as a very, very important partner when it comes to getting the information out to the right people at the right time in situations that we are not used to?
And the role that they're playing in the life of keeping people informed in the new world, is that sort of the question?
Yes.
Yeah. I'll make sure to bring that forward to the next guest. Endre, thank you so much for doing this. I really, really appreciate the conversation, and I learned tons. And I will make sure to then, because there's some things I know that you publish and so on, I'll make sure to then republish that for the listeners to follow you. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
I really hope you liked this episode. Again, sitting here editing the video, and I hope if you like these videos and you find the content that we put out on Inside Shapes News, that you will find the time to hit the subscribe button across channels YouTube, Spotify, Apple, and follow the conversation that we put on the biggest topics that is happening in the industry. Thank you so much for listening.